Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. It's fantastic to see you all. Welcome to the session this afternoon. Is it the afternoon? No, it's the morning. Oof, I can tell I'm tired. I'm Daisy Chapman-Chamberlain. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Rail Services Lead at Rail North Partnership, which is the statutory body which oversees rail investment and development in the north of England. And we're here today with a fantastic panel of industry leaders to discuss the future of rail. So we have this amazing senior panel of rail leaders to explore the potential and the challenges as we move into the next phase of rail growth, including culture and wider opportunities. So I will hand straight over to Elliot to introduce himself.
Morning everybody, my name is Elliot Judge. I work with Network Rail and my role is to support the industry to tackle sexual harassment. Previously I've worked for the NHS England and universities in the east of England doing this work, and prior to that I was a cop for 32 years. Retired but haven't really stopped working since I stopped working.
Good morning colleagues, I'm Jake Kelly, Network Rail's Deputy Chief Executive, and I run North West and Central Region, and my job is to deliver the railway to our users, to our customers, to our taxpayers.
I'm Kirsty. I'm the Managing Director of PriestmanGoode. We are a design consultancy that specialises in passenger experiences and designing rail, aviation, cruise ship, future mobility solutions.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Mellor. I am a Detective Chief Inspector with British Transport Police. We are the national police force that covers the entire length and breadth of the rail network in England, Scotland and Wales. I have the absolute privilege of leading our work to tackle violence and intimidation against women and girls. I also lead our teams dealing with offender management and modern slavery.
Thank you so much. We will have time for Q&A later, so please hold your questions for the end. But we'll jump straight in with the conversation with a small question. Is the railway, as it is, designed for everybody? Who'd like to start us off? Go on, Come on then, Nia.
Okay. I mean, it's my primary job, isn't it, to keep the railway safe? That's what the police are there to do. And I guess, very sadly speaking, I think as a whole, the rail network is statistically very, very safe. You know, for 1.7 billion passenger journeys a year, your chances of becoming a victim of crime are slim. But sadly, we know that that feeling of safety is not experienced by all equally. And certainly for women and girls working on and travelling across the network, the experiences are very, very different, and certainly from my perspective, a massive area of focus for society as a whole, but certainly for us all across the rail industry. There is a lot of work to do to make that experience safer for everybody.
Yes, I'd echo that. On the one hand, the railway does an amazing job carrying and welcoming millions of customers every day, and the vast majority of those journeys are really high quality. But as Nia says, too many of our customers, particularly but not exclusively women, customers with additional accessibility needs, don't find our railway welcoming, and there is a huge opportunity for us both to discharge our duty to make the railway safe and welcoming for all of our communities, but actually also a big patronage and revenue opportunity to make sure that all of our users feel safe and welcomed on our railway when they use it. We're dealing with a Victorian inheritance, but that's no excuse for how we have to look into the future and make it better.
And I would add to that you know, good design is all about creating universal experiences. So that's about thinking about all the audiences. And sometimes that can be a blanket solution for everyone. But what we really see in our work is that if we engage people with very specific needs, and that might be an elderly person, it might be a person who's experiencing a particular life moment or has specific needs, it might be a carer, that if you elevate the experience for all of those individual needs, you actually make a better experience for everyone, and that then makes it more accessible. And I think that is the future of rail for me.
I think it's a really common thread, isn't it, that when you make the railway better for pretty much universally any group, that actually improves the railway for everyone to use. So whether that's a design feature, whether that's a cultural piece, whether that's policing, it almost universally improves it for everyone. But Elliot, I wonder, when we say design of the railway, what about, I suppose, that internal design structure? Is that fit for everyone who's working in the railway?
I think it's getting better. I think people are now talking about some of the challenges that are being faced. Violence against women and girls and all of the movements that have been happening over the last few years have really brought it to the forefront. New legislation has come in the Worker Protection Act, so organisations have a responsibility to make sure that their staff are protected from this type of behaviour. And as Nia said, it's a really important thing. This isn't a railway industry issue, this is a societal issue. And when we employ people from society, then we'll employ people that are doing that. So we must start to talk about this in places like this, sharing people's experiences, their concerns, and their potential solutions. In Network Rail, those that were here yesterday, we're doing lots and lots to speak to people to understand why do they think this type of behaviour happens. What stops people from reporting it? And if you know why it's happening and you know why people aren't reporting it, it really gives you a good chance to make some change. But the industry is massive. And whilst we might be doing this in Network Rail, wouldn't it be great if you're an employee and something happens to you and you haven't got to worry about what policy it breaches? Because the industry's got one policy, one standard, one expectation of their staff. When you report it, you've got one number to report the incident on. If, in the unlikely event something does happen to you, you're getting the same service, which is compassionate, trauma-informed. So, is it there? No. Is any industry there? No. Is the industry doing some great work to make change? I think they are.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And I think, just to rewind slightly back to the design point, Kirsty, those of you who know me will know recently I've been to Japan, and it's all I talk about. So I've been looking at the design of the Japanese railways, design of trains, designs of railway stations, etc. And one thing that is a consistent feature there is women-only carriages. And it's something that keeps coming up in the UK as well. You'll have seen there was a petition in London that gained quite a lot of traction around, you know, TfL should introduce women-only carriages. So from a design perspective, but also I suppose how you see the wider rail perspective, is there a role for women-only carriages or indeed maybe other elements of design and delivery processes to make the railway safer?
I mean, I think from our perspective, we wouldn't necessarily advocate for women-only carriages, because I think that's suggesting that the problem is around putting women in isolation as opposed to addressing the behaviour around it. So I think a more rounded solution is to engage around those other behaviours, and I think sometimes it can single out or isolate the women in the carriage, and I know that culturally there are different experiences of that around the world, but I think it is for us a behaviour issue, so better to kind of elevate the experience overall and look at solutions, innovations to make people feel more visible in the carriage or make it easier to access support or help if you are in a situation where you feel at risk. And also engage people in the design of those experiences. So make sure there are women on the panels of companies commissioning design, and that once you are designing, that you are checking in with users alongside the creation of that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you agree with that, Nia?
Yeah, I think I've been working in this space for about 5 years now, and I think when I first started on this journey, it was very much about what women have to do. You know, women need to take certain actions to keep themselves safe, and I think we've come a long way since then. It's not about women having to do something different, to sit in a specific carriage, to not wear, certain clothing, all of the rhetoric we've heard over the years. This is now about us in policing, making it a hostile environment for those people who feel that they can come onto our network, display those kind of behaviours and not be challenged. So for me, it's very much moving into the space of, we are a community within the rail industry, so we want to encourage people to be able to take really safe, non-confrontational actions that can help to build that community spirit. So, you know, we do a lot of work with our partners across the industry around active bystanders, giving people some really simple tools, tactics that they can engage with on their journeys. If they see something happening, makes them feel uncomfortable, they can see a person is being made to feel uncomfortable. Just really simple interruption of that behaviour is more important than isolating women in a women-only carriage. So that's kind of where we've moved to. It's a hostile environment for the perpetrator, but that community of people looking out for each other on their journey and having the confidence to step in and report if they see something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I agree with all of that, but as a dad of a 19-year-old daughter, I think I'd quite like her to get into a female-only train with someone in there that could protect. The last thing I'd want her to be in is a female-only train and there's no one there, and all of a sudden she's really vulnerable because she's got into that train alone. So I guess I do agree with what you're saying, and I think that's got to be the right position, but I also try to think what I'd like for my wife, my daughter, my friends and relatives. So it's a really difficult one, and I think we can do all we can, we must do all we can to prevent this stuff, and active bystander is absolutely crucial, but I don't think that's there yet. I think it's a journey, so what do we do in the interim to try to support people, which is why the design of everything is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a big GBR opportunity here. So often over the last 25 years, good stuff has happened, but it's happened in pockets. And there's now an opportunity to be much more systematic about it, much more systematic about safety by design than we've had before. There have been some really good pockets of it, but it hasn't been systematic. Much more systematic about how we have more frontline railway colleagues now than we've had for more than a generation. How do we make best use of them to confront and support our customers in ways that sometimes works really well, sometimes doesn't? Actually, you know, I can see Transport for London colleagues in the audience. Transport for London have started to do that much better than we have so far. There's a really big opportunity for us to get serious. And as Elliot says, for the first time, certainly in my railway career, I think we're leaning into it now and starting to realise the scale of the problem. Railway colleagues, you know, we feel at ease and comfortable in a railway environment because we're used to it. It feels safe. We know how it works. What we haven't been so good at seeing is putting ourselves in the shoes of our users, our customers, women late at night. And I think that's what's now changing. And now we've got an opportunity to do something more systematic about it.
I mean, I think we're in a really curious place as a society, aren't we, globally? And I think there are two things around that, particularly around staff. Like when you're travelling, you are so much in the care of those staff, and they hold such responsibility, and they really kind of set the tone and manage that environment. And I was recently in the US, and I travelled on the subway in LA. And on the subway, they have security guards. And it shifts the tone into such a different place because I feel like in our transport system here in the UK, we are still in that place of feeling cared for or managed in the environment. And I think if you move too far into a space where it is like moving towards security, then that actually, it almost dictates a different behaviour within the environment as well. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think the growth of what I would kind of term the capable guardian is so important because people in a vulnerable situation, for whatever reason, they will look for somebody in a uniform. It doesn't matter if it's a police uniform, it could be a cleaner on a station, but they are the person they will gravitate to for that help. So it's ensuring that we are giving those individuals the confidence to deal with whatever they're presented with really good training, with support from senior leadership, accountability. And certainly recently in March, we published our joint strategy with the whole of the rail industry with some really significant commitments around what we collectively as an entire industry are going to do to tackle this problem. And there's key things around body-worn video. There's key things around staff vetting, because we want to make sure that those capable guardians are actually a safe person for that vulnerable person to go to. We don't want to be creating more victims of crime by not having the right people in those places. So, training is absolutely so important.
Yeah, and so we're looking obviously towards the future. We're acknowledging that there are challenges, but there's also a huge range of opportunities within this. But as we move in that direction, do we need to have a mindset change, or do we have the correct mindset in the industry currently, or do we feel that there is a need for broader cultural change within the sector?
Well, as an industry, do we reflect the communities we serve? No, we don't. And that has in the past proved to be a problem for the way we look at how we look after our customers, because actually we don't have the insight that we need. Are we? But your question was, are we as a leadership of the industry serious about this? Yes, deadly serious. Absolutely deadly serious. The amount of time I and colleagues like me spend talking about it and recognising we've got a long way to go, but working out what we do has changed by an order of magnitude over the last couple of years. So deadly serious, but a long way further to go.
I think we've seen some really good examples of what collectively we can do to make change in the rail industry. I think prime example at the moment is very recently the new public sexual harassment law was commenced in April. That came about predominantly. There were a couple of really strong charities, Plan International, My Streets Now, Our Streets Now, sorry, but British Transport Police, Transport for London, Rail Delivery Group were all part of that campaign to lobby the government, to lobby the Home Office, to make the change, to fill that gap in the law so that we actually had something tangible with some teeth behind it to tackle these behaviours. We've done a lot of work to raise awareness, but actually if there isn't that bespoke piece of law that shows that there are consequences for your actions, then we're fighting a bit of a losing battle. So I think the fact that we were behind that law being put into place, really proud that British Transport Police got the first ever conviction. Hopefully some of you might have seen some of the really positive news coverage last week, but we've got to put our money where our mouth is about this. We've got to get behind lobbying the Home Office, government, ministers, to ensure that our rail network is safe for everybody, which at the moment it still isn't, sadly.
I wonder, Jake, you mentioned revenue, that this isn't just, I suppose, the right thing to do. It is also a financial proposition in that a railway that actually works for all is going to naturally bring in more revenue through ticket sales, etc. When we think about mindset, do you feel that this is, when we are kind of trying to push these initiatives out into the sector, should we be focusing on this is a revenue proposition, this is pounds and pence, or should we be focusing on purely, back to your point, Elliot, 19-year-old daughter, this is the right thing to do, everyone deserves to be able to travel safely, and how do I suppose we kind of find a balance between the two of them?
So I don't think they need to be in competition. Yes, we must focus on making the railways a welcoming place for everyone because it's the right thing to do. Absolutely, we must. But the fact that it is not in competition with our P&O imperatives makes it even more important that we do it. So I think it's a really nice example of where you can have a number of wins in different places all at the same time. Just makes it even more important that we face into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a design perspective, Kirsty, when we talk about mindset, I'm wondering, so for some of this, there is a need to actually have an initial outlay of finances. And I think something I've noticed in design, for example, is that it is about, unfortunately, has historically been going for the cheapest possible option. What fits all is, most of the time, not the cheapest possible option. So how do we balance, I think, that the mindset of, we are moving into a challenging subsidy-based future. We are moving into a future where the, pounds are even tighter than they've ever been, with actually some of this in terms of design is going to cost more in the immediate term?
I think it's looking at total life cycle cost. So it's, you buy a new piece of rolling stock, in principle it could be in service for like 30 years. So it's
only 30.
But you need to think about it over the long term rather than that immediate kind of capital investment, and be designing things so they are modular and flexible so they can adapt to changes, whether that's kind of to hard changes around like seating layout, or it might be around technology changes. So it's about anticipating what is coming. And I think it's also about really looking at the investment in innovation to ensure that the explored avenues innovation are supported to help them get into production or into use, because I think, Innovate UK does a great job of, initiating and developing ideas, but I actually think there is a place for more support for actually transitioning those things into service, and I think the industry would really benefit from that.
I'm not sure there is a trade-off between doing the right thing by design and cost. I know as a railway we can be very good at saying, certainly we'll do that for you, Minister, and that will cost you millions, if not billions of pounds. But actually, my experience of leading now a large number of capital projects is if you get in at the ground floor of the design process, you can find minimum viable product ways of designing things in that don't cost money. Of course, there are further choices which might, but actually you can deliver an awful lot for very little if you're at the ground floor of it. And that's what we need to do. Making sure that in Great British Railways we have we spend hundreds of millions of pounds a year as a country on new stations. We don't. We spend tens of millions on security at new stations. What we don't do is design them so that our users feel safe. Well, use that money to do all of those things at the same time.
Absolutely. I think then, Elliot, from your perspective, with your background in, obviously, with policing and then in healthcare and now in rail, what is your view, I suppose, of the mindset that is required, not just at a senior level, but at all levels of a business to kind of effect this sort of change?
I think it needs to start right from the top, and I think in Network Rail it has and continues to do. I think setting the standards, setting the tone of what's expected, generating those conversations, and I think for large organisations not being afraid to tackle the difficult bits. So senior leaders that perhaps haven't acted appropriately as we would have wanted them to, not shying away from tackling that head on. Making sure that you're open about the work that you're doing, so publicising some of the results that you're having as a result of investigating some of this type of incidents, letting people know that actually stuff does happen, you just don't hear about it. So let people know we are tackling this, we are doing this. As a result of this, this has happened. That generates confidence that your organisation will be doing something. As we've all said, these aren't quick fixes, and sometimes there's back to my daughter, I want her safe, so she won't want that. She'll want to be on a train where she can just step on, and I want that for her as well. So I think when you talk about different layers, really listening to them, and then Network Rail have a zero tolerance approach to sexual harassment. That doesn't mean if you do it, you're going to get sacked. It means we're not going to walk by it. We're going to take it seriously. We're going to deal with it consistently. And that definition wasn't designed by the executives. It was designed by frontline staff saying, this is what we want Network Rail to mean when we talk about zero tolerance. So I think listening and all of the things that I've said, but sometimes making some decisions and going into exploration, knowing you're going to hear some really difficult things and things that are going to make you feel uncomfortable. And I think sometimes that uncomfortableness is a part of the journey and helpful. And if you just go for the easy stuff, then you're not going to have any change at all that's any meaningful. You have a big campaign, big announcement, and then it will disappear. It's continuing with the communications and developing and making sure everyone's aware of their part to play, as well as what the organisations are doing to do that. And like I say, this isn't just the railway, this is every organisation up and down the globe.
I think if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing, really. You have to have that discomfort to kind of push you forwards. And I think one thing that I've certainly noticed in, the work that I've been doing across this piece is that there is a fear of saying the wrong thing. There is a fear of doing the wrong thing, particularly from my male colleagues, for example, who say, well, I'd love to get involved, and of course I care, but I I might say the wrong thing and then I'm going to be in trouble. And I think that's not the case at all. I think it's very much a case of being open to acknowledging that something is uncomfortable, acknowledging you've said the wrong thing, and moving forward and learning from that is a really important process.
So I can give no better example than my daughter. She's 19, and last year, twice, she called me out for being inappropriate. She's like, Dad, you're supposed to be the sexual harassment expert, and you're making comments like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, you said this. I go, okay, what's wrong with that? So she tells me the words she used and the words I use is 1953, very different. But you think, okay, well, I won't say that again. So I think it's okay to make mistakes. I don't think it's okay to keep making the same mistakes. And I think if you're trying to change culture, you don't do it by investigating every complaint that's made. You do it through education. And sometimes, probably the majority of the times, people aren't aware that their comment, their behaviour has been received in the way it was, and perhaps it wasn't intended that way. But I think it's okay to make mistakes. It's not okay to keep making the same mistake.
I think that's a very fair point. So thinking about then the range of roles that we have in rail, and rail is obviously, as we know, a huge organisation, a huge industry with a huge number of organisations, and then within those organisations, a huge number of different roles and responsibilities. So then to the panel, thinking about the role that you're in, the organisation that you're in, what should we be doing as individuals and organisations to push this change forward and meet these needs? But then also, what would your call to action be to, I suppose, anyone in the audience and anyone in any organisation, for if you are an individual and you want to begin this journey, what can you do? So what should we be doing and what should they be doing?
So I think we can all be role models. Elliot talked about actually, considering the journey that we're all on as individuals. What impact are we having? What are we talking about at work? What are we showing by the way we lead we think is important? How are we creating an environment where colleagues are capable and customers are capable of talking about it and addressing it? If we all do that, then the small number of people who do this stuff deliberately are going to start to feel deeply, deeply uncomfortable, and that's a good thing. And everyone else is going to be working in an environment where actually everyone feels welcome and being proud to work for the railway. So how can we be role models in the way we lead, whether we lead a group of people, whether we're in a team, doesn't matter, we can all be role models.
I also think reflecting on your behaviour over the years, would I have made a comment during my time in policing that someone would have found offensive? I'm sure I had have done. Have I walked past behaviour that someone was being subjected to behaviour? I'm sure I would have done. Have I laughed at a comment that someone would have felt uncomfortable about? Yeah, I should have done. It doesn't mean to say I can't reflect, it doesn't mean to say I can't learn and use that information, but I think sometimes just thinking about what we've done and ignored can be really helpful as a starting position, and then realising, crikey, that poor person, when I walked past that, really needed my help and I didn't do that. I'm going to make sure I don't do that again.
Yeah.
And put ourselves in the shoes of our colleagues. I've got a 21-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. None of us want our daughters, our sons, anyone to feel like that. So put ourselves in the shoes of people who are going through the rough end of this. That's quite liberating, actually.
Yeah.
Because most of us don't want any of that to happen.
I was going to say two things. One, I think recruitment and thinking about your future kind of staffing, future teams is like key to this. I think you need to start really, really kind of engaging with young people, kind of pre-16 almost, to start to illustrate what opportunities there are in industry. So like the diversity of roles that are available. And obviously I'm coming from a design perspective. We're an industrial design consultancy, and the majority of people that study industrial design are still male. But I have worked for my company for 25 years. I was the only female hired there 25 years ago. We now have achieved like about around 50-50 parity, and that's in the industrial design team too, but we have worked really hard at that. And that is about engaging with, we work with schools, we work with sixth forms, we work with universities, we offer work experience, which I think is so key to show what opportunities there are. And often people, you know, particularly young people, before they make their choices, even like 13 and 14, don't know like the vista of opportunity there is in these industries. So it is about, I think it's about changing culture so that your company, once that they're there, that they are welcoming, embracing and supportive environments. I mean, people in rail are really, you know, passionate about what they do. Any kind of public engagement role is like such a key part of society. It's such an attractive industry to work in, but I'm not sure that perhaps the industry sells those benefits to young people. And the second part is around just raising awareness of issues. So, for example, we are working with Daisy on a research project around safety, but we've also commissioned Central St. Martin's this year to do a project for us around improving safety in rail. We had that presentation this week. Solutions were absolutely brilliant. We're really hoping to showcase those, but they had also drawn in experts. So they were working with the Violence Against Women and Girls officer from Islington Council, and they had pulled on like experts from TfL to bring in kind of a breadth of experience as well as testing ideas with potential users. So I think it's using like the opportunity you have in your own networks to do something which is perhaps beyond your, you know, we're doing this not as a kind of commercial project. We're doing this because we think in our role as designers that we have an incredible privilege of seeing experience and diversity of experience in different industries. How do we bring that into more the center of public discourse to raise awareness?
Yeah, on the point of young people in particular, I completely echo your point about there isn't enough awareness and knowledge of what those jobs are. So I used to work in community rail. I was an education officer quite a while ago now. And I used to ask, it was one of the very first questions I would ask when I went into a school is, what are the roles in rail? What are the jobs in rail that you're aware of? And any audience, whether I was talking to 5-year-olds or 15-year-olds, there would always be 2 jobs that they would bring up. Train driver and the man that collects the tickets. And once someone said to me, the boss. And that's it. Apparently, those are all the jobs that we have in this industry. So it's a huge, I think, information gap that there's definitely a role for us all to fill.
And that, of course, is connected to a massive skills shortage that we're anticipating. So it's incredibly important that that piece of work is done.
I suppose finally, from a policing perspective, you know, it is our role to police the rail network. I will never say to you, you know, come on and start trying to police the network, but there are definitely things that everyone can do and take back to their respective teams around challenging that behaviour, whether it's within your work environment, whether you see something out and about on the network. You know, if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable, challenge it and report it. And secondly, if you do have somebody having the bravery and courage to come forward and to tell you about an experience they've had, make sure that you are using language that is showing that you believe them, that you support them, and that you can signpost them to whatever support mechanism you have within your workplace. And I guess I couldn't get away without a call to action around reporting, and I think we all hear it every day on our journey, see it, say it, sorted. Still the misconception that that's just there to report terrorism-related incidents is absolutely not. Our text 61016 is there to report anything at all on your journey that makes you uncomfortable. So if you haven't got it plugged into your phone, 61016, that is the number that I would encourage you to kind of share as far and wide as you can and use it. We get some excellent results, and it is discreet. It is a super effective way of passing that information on to us in BTP, and it really, really does work.
It is. I will just echo that. It is a really amazing resource. I've had to use it twice, unfortunately, but within texting, within 2 stops of the service, officers have boarded that service, and that's happened on both occasions. So it is a really fantastic resource. So yeah, we definitely echo that point. So I'm sure we've got lots of questions from the audience, and we will be having a roving mic coming around. So please make sure you pop your hand up, wait for the mic to come to you, and then introduce your name and organisation, and then please ask the panel your questions. So, who has a question first? Right behind you, at the back.
Hiya, thank you for the panel, really insightful. Richard Harmer, CEO of Young Rail Professionals. So, as an organisation, we focus on trying to help inspire the next generation of railway talent, so it's really positive to hear all this, everything from culture to opportunities. One of the big things that we find with people who volunteer is the idea of social value. So a lot of our chairs and people that volunteer at regional levels are really passionate about making a difference in their area. So I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on, how important is social value and how can we make sure that it carries through, not just from people that are in the industry, but also at a young level with schools.
Gosh. I mean, from a policing perspective, we understand that people don't necessarily want to come and speak to the police. We are the ones that potentially lock people up. But for us, it's so important that we can get out into the communities, we can hear the experiences, we can understand how we can better shape our approach to things. And I think it's through initiatives like that we would love to get more involved with. We would love to have the opportunity to, have all of those voices feeding into what we do, because we definitely don't know best about how to keep the railway safe a lot of the time.
I think from my perspective on this, I think a lot of maybe SMEs in particular would feel that there wasn't a role for them to get involved, or maybe that individuals working in the industry feel that in terms of social value, it's something that they, would struggle to, I suppose, impact on an individual basis. But to that, I will give a plug to Community Rail. I am the chairperson of the Oxfordshire Community Rail Partnership. There will be a Community Rail Partnership near you. It's an absolute guarantee, whoever you are, wherever you are, that you can go and get involved in that particular way in contributing to social value. And that creates that feedback loop, as Nia says, back into your organisation, whatever that is, either in a personal or professional capacity, to create that, I suppose, information loop between what the communities are saying and what they need, and then also giving back in terms of that social value.
As a conventional railway, we're given over £8 billion a year of public money. We're given that not because there's any underlying intrinsic good in railways, but because of the huge public, social and economic benefit that we bring. So it is absolutely incumbent on us to make sure that we are doing our absolute best by the societies and communities that we serve. Is there much more to do? And you do some of it. Yeah, there's a lot more to do, but we can't ignore it, because we have to justify every pound of that. When there are such difficult choices that the government is facing about where it makes its expenditure, we have to demonstrate that we are maximising the value that the government gets for that. And that's not just through rail journeys. That's about all the other things that really good public transport and freight haulage unlocks.
There was a question at the front here, this gentleman. Just in the middle.
Yeah, Mark Sullivan, former Transport Users Consultative Committee. I mean, this subject isn't really quite the one in the book, in the programme, but there is a rather important point about design, and PriestmanGoode knows what's coming, because your company was involved with British Rail's design. And the loss of the design panel after privatisation resulted in a whole lot of hodgepodge, bad designs, and of course trains that people don't think are well designed inside and are not comfortable. So the challenge is, and you know where you get the source, which is the 2 books by David Lawrence, British Rail Design and British Rail Architecture. But what I'd ask you is, would you have a look at PriestmanGoode at returning to the layout of coaches, which are face-to-back seating at windows and in the high-speed train, but particularly, and this is relevant to the BTP, and I hope they take it up, the design was that the train, the seats, between the seats back to back, you slid your suitcase in. And in the HSTs, nobody ever had a concern about luggage being stolen from racks because they put it in a safe place. But once you started putting in all the airline seating, that was lost. So I do think it's a challenge for your chief constable to also say that that would be an improvement in design. But could I just put it back in your hands, because you are a company who did work for British Rail very successfully. And we are looking to Great British Railways not to have stupid paint schemes, which they've got so far, but actually get back to design of the railway as a whole. You do understand that that's been lost.
I mean, I should clarify that I think you're referring to Jane Priestman, who actually didn't work for PriestmanGoode. But Jane Priestman, of course, yes, Jane Priestman, of course, kind of led that work for British Rail many years ago. But that's independent of PriestmanGoode. One of the issues around, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I think is one of the key issues around luggage between seats is around visibility. And I guess when we were in a time of British Rail, we were less concerned around visibility in a carriage of all luggage. I will ask my experts, but I think that is the case. I think there is obviously lots of work always to do around the opportunities around layout and configuration. It's obviously around meeting numbers and capacity. And at that time, for British Rail, there was more consistency over the network. And I guess, that is an opportunity which might come with GBR too. We've obviously seen the new livery of the trains. And I think, certainly consistency of experience and service will probably be part of that.
Very quickly, one about visibility, they were behind the seat, one's down at the edge by the door. That's where, once they started putting out these stacks, that's when stealing of luggage started.
I think it's
less. That's what I'm saying to BTP, that put the old system, which existed in the 60s and 70s designs, and it was in the original design of railways that came in 1965, actually was more secure.
I think I was actually referring to the risk of terrorism.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when we talk about security, obviously we are talking about the concealment of items, for example. It's why we've now got the clear bin bags across the network, for example, is for the same reason. So it is about the visibility. But there does have to be a trade-off, of course, when we talk about design between the elements of comfort that we need. There was a really interesting paper, and I'm kicking myself now. I cannot remember the name of the woman who wrote it, but she recently published a paper, maybe a week ago actually, you may have seen it, talking about how trains have been fundamentally designed for one type of person and one type of body. So even things like the height of the luggage racks, for example, are designed for one particular type of person, and it's not one size fits all approach. So it has to be that trade-off between the security and the safety and the comfort, and then design that meets all needs, which is big challenge, but I'm sure PriestmanGoode will solve it. We did have a question from someone over here. I think it was, gentleman in the corner.
Good luck.
Hiya. Mark for Network Rail High Speed. I just want to say at first, I really resonate with Elliot's comments sort of regarding, making mistakes and sort of being human and that aspect of how we're going to kind of move forward when it comes to the campaign around sexual harassment. I had a few questions. I think it's regarding kind of maybe the new generation of coming into rail, but also how we're teaching them and things like that. Obviously, with the current climate, obviously with social media, we hear about the ban and things like this. I just want to get sort of the panel's thoughts on how we can use not necessarily social media because we know what's happening, but other sort of forms maybe in schools and things like that, and how we're kind of going to develop on top of that to get the message to them. But also to kind of understand where we're going with the career side of things as well, and knowing that, rail is a great place to work and the opportunities in it.
Rail is certainly a great place to work, isn't it? Talent is really scarce. So the more we can do to get the best people we possibly can into rail, the better. There are lots of good examples of where going into schools has made a difference, and we see through our recruitment, I don't know whether you're an example of people who said, I talked to a railway person at school and that changed what I decided to do. But it's all very piecemeal at the moment. Network Rail does quite a lot of stuff, individual operators do things, supply chain does other things. There's a real opportunity for us to join ourselves up more. So watch this space, I think.
I'm sure we could keep going for hours, realistically, and I know there are other questions, so please do feel free to come up and grab our panellists at the end if you're all able to stick around for a few minutes to answer those lingering questions. But for now, we have to conclude, so thank you so much. That was incredibly passionate and incredibly detailed. So can we have a round of applause, please, for the speakers? And I hope you will all be staying for the next session on accessibility. Thank you very much.